All right, and we're live at Expert35. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, and as promised, experts from 35 different industries talking about the challenges, the hardships, and the opportunities. How are things changing? How the environment is changing? And today we've got two experts with us. We've got Judy Young again. Thank you for joining us again, Judy.
Pleasure to be here.
And Gail Roberson from Trinity University. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
And today we're talking admissions. Why? Because Judy helped all these students, all these great new futures and bright new futures get into college, get to their next level. So many changes. That conversation we had a couple of weeks ago just really spurred a whole new world of more questions. And we have answers, and hopefully you guys can have the answers. So please, again, thank you so much for being part of the show today. Guys, if you want to join us, text Expert35 to the number on the screen. We've got a couple of great lineups, and go ahead and ask questions. This is an opportunity to talk to admissions at Trinity University. There's so many things changing, and we'd love to have your questions. Love to be able to answer them. We're going to answer them live, but I'll let you guys just run with it. Judy, Mike, yours.
Yes, so Gail, thank you so much for joining us. I know families out there have lots and lots of questions. They're just taking a deep breath after, homeschooling. So the big question I think on people's minds is, will the college admissions process change with coronavirus? How is that affecting things?
I think that that's a big question for families. And I think that those answers are certainly still coming out and things are still changing. But I think that the basic answer here is yes. I think the college admission process is going to change and adapt to the needs of our families and of our students as well. There are some larger trends that we are seeing as far as changes within the admission process. I think the biggest change there that we're really seeing amongst many universities is that many of us have indeed gone test optional. And so if an institution is evaluating a student's application within a holistic manner, we generally look at different criteria in order to make that decision. And usually the SAT or the ACT has been one of those criteria sets. This year, because of the lack of test dates starting in March and continuing until now, many of our students that normally would have taken one or two of the exams haven't been able to do so. And so I think the admission policies are shifting to really, I think, better meet the needs of our families there as well. And so we will still be looking holistically at the applicant, but without the use of test scores, either in SAT or ACT.
And we're getting some great questions here from Jennifer. She's saying, what if you're not a good test taker? Because some people may have tests, and I guess part of the question is, will you look at them if they send them in? But if you're not a good test taker, should you just say, what a relief, they're not looking at them? It doesn't matter.
Absolutely. That's a great question. I think that really this is a little bit of a different scenario. Many institutions have been test optional for a number of years, some as many as 30 years or more. And some of us, and Trinity is one of those institutions, we have actually decided to go test optional due to the COVID limitations of test dates. I think students do indeed have the prerogative of either deciding to go ahead and send in test scores or to not send in test scores, but we are not assuming one way or the other as to why a student maybe hasn't sent in a test score. So as we are approaching the application evaluation itself, as a reader, I'm not assuming that the student had a low test score and decided to withhold, or the student maybe wasn't able to test. And so I think that it's important to know that students can feel confident in going test optional with those schools that are indeed practicing a test optional policy. There is a great website out there, and I know that we talked about this actually a little bit earlier as well, Judy. I think there's a great website that has a list of most, if not all, of the institutions that have gone test optional as well. And that website is called fairtest.org. So it's fair, FAIR test.org. And that really has a list of most institutions that are test optional.
So I have a question that actually a parent asked me yesterday. So many students would normally have tested perhaps 2 or even 3 times.
Right.
So they didn't have a chance to, they have a good score, but they might have had a better score. what would you advise? How should they think about that? Should they send in the score that's pretty good, but they really would have probably done better had they had more opportunities to test? Where is that? What is your thought process or advice around that?
Right. You know, I think, again, I think it's a little bit more dependent on what the student is most comfortable with. I think it's important on the college admission side that we give information. We can weigh out the pros and cons with the student, but we can't tell them explicitly what they should do. I would say general, like, rule of thumb here, if a student's test score is within that middle 50% range of an institution, I think that they should feel fairly confident in sending that score in. Though the higher the score, it might be the higher the merit-based aid as well. And so if they do feel like their score is not reflective of their performance, I probably would not send the score in for the admission review.
Wait, say that last part again. If it is not in that middle 50%, you probably wouldn't send it in.
I probably would not, and I think that you know, that again is the student's prerogative, but it would not necessarily be as competitive within the admission process as if it were in that middle 50% or above.
And I'm not sure everyone's familiar with middle 50%.
Right, great.
Absolutely. So the middle 50%, this is what I need you guys to hold me true to, right? Defining all of these terms that come into the admission process. So the middle 50% basically refers to the 25th to the 75th percentile of test scores for that particular university. So if we are looking at averages, we are looking at about 50% or about half of the student body of that particular institution might be scoring in between these two scores. 25% might have scored under, 25% might have scored over, but that middle 50% is really the average range for that particular institution.
That's
and
great.
You're going to have a lot of people listening, especially because on Monday we talked about a lot of the distance learning and emotional social learning. What about like disadvantaged populations or like low income families? Like, do all the same rules apply? Can you just speak to that a little bit? Because I know that's something that's really heavy on some of the people's minds right now.
Absolutely. So I think that when we're looking at students and families that might be in a lower socioeconomic band, I think typically speaking within test scores, there might not necessarily be that same level of test prep available for those particular students. There are free resources such as Khan Academy, but certainly some of the classes and some of the companies that provide test prep can be relatively expensive. So I think with a test optional policy, if a student is not necessarily feeling that they were as prepared, then they should not feel compelled to send that test score in for their admission review either.
And just to clarify for people out there, so they don't think they have to be statisticians, you can just Google the words middle 50%.
Oh,
I think SAT
may have lost her.
Absolutely.
So, okay, what other questions are coming up? And I know we're jumping around a little bit, but I think
this is a great question, right? I mean, everybody's been asking, will students go back to school and in person? People want to
drum roll, please.
Okay, so you were asking me to look in the crystal ball for a little bit of this answer, but I will do my best to address this. I think it is going to vary largely institution by institution, and I think it will largely vary also on geographic region. There are areas of the country where many of the institutions have already announced that they will not be returning in the fall in person. And then in other regions of the country, there are indeed efforts being made to return in person. I can speak a little bit more, I think, specifically about Trinity here. And it is, we are looking at a model, I would say, that is fairly consistent with many of the other universities within Texas. And that is, we are intending to open in person in the fall. Things will look a little different. And so we have just announced actually that we will be starting our academic semester about a week early, and we will be ending our in-person instruction by Thanksgiving. We will continue to have finals after Thanksgiving, but those will be given remotely. And this is a model that many institutions are using to avoid students going home or exiting the campus for a short period of time during that Thanksgiving break, and then returning for finals and perhaps bringing back anything with them as well. And so we are trying to de-densify some of those classroom spaces, as well as shifting those academic calendars to best prepare for the health and safety of our students through the semester and through the year.
Perfect. I've got a question from Greg. He says, will schools ever go back to testing after this is over? And maybe we should talk about what kind of testing. I'm sure there's still tests at school.
Right. No, that's an excellent question, Greg. So I think in many cases, institutions, so universities and colleges that have announced a test optional policy, you may have noticed that many institutions are saying we will offer a test optional admission practice for 1 year or perhaps for 3 years. In many cases, I think this 1 to 3 year time frame for their admission policies really does give institutions and colleges an opportunity to reassess. And so it may not be a permanent decision, and it may be after a year or after 3 years' time, we start looking at the data. We are looking at the successfulness of students that have gone test optional and the successfulness that they have had as current students at our institutions, and then either implementing or perhaps retracting the test optional policy at that point. And so I think some schools will probably return to testing as part of the admission criteria, and I think some institutions will probably continue to be test optional. I would certainly think that a larger percentage of schools will probably continue to be test optional after this as well.
Right. And I think this is a little outside of the realm of admissions, but it's an important question, right? If there's a vaccine, well, I guess you could speak on Trinity, but do you think students will be vaccinated?
You know, this is an excellent question, and I don't think that we have the exact answer here either. A period of time ago, and Judy, you may have a better time frame here than I do. I want to say probably 10 years ago, the meningitis vaccine was actually required of all students who were going to be residents on a college campus. I could guess that this may be a similar policy, that it would be a requirement for students that will be in the residence halls or something of that like, but really, I don't know.
I think that's a really important, and it's almost like a very difficult line to understand. You got Shanna giving you a shout out. Thank you for the resource. And Judy, you had a couple of other really interesting points, right? A couple of questions you want to ask as well?
Yes. So we're getting another question that really rolls into this. What extracurriculars are helpful? And I hear this all the time for college admissions, but I'd like to reframe that in this way. Given that you don't have test scores, how will that impact how you look at the rest of what is submitted?
Absolutely. I do think that, and this is going to be Trinity specific, our best indication of college success is a student's GPA and what they have done within their high school academic experience. And so we are trying to ask that question first. Will the student be successful within the academic environment and within the classroom environment? And then all of the other pieces of the application and of the student experience really comes into play as well. I think that with GPA, with rigor of coursework, with the competitiveness of a high school environment, all of these things give us a little bit of context, beyond those test scores as to how a student may be able to thrive within a campus environment. I think when we get into the other pieces of the application, and in particular the essay and the extracurricular, I guess, opportunities and activities that you mentioned, Judy, this is really shaping that community for us as well. And so I think as a residential campus, Trinity very much wants to see our students be involved outside of the classroom. And so we actually look to those extracurricular activities to see if they're going to be involved within our campus community as well. Are they pursuing particular passions through their academic and extracurricular work? Are they developing leadership skills and communication skills? What type of dedication are we looking at? And I think it's really important for us to look again a bit more generally at extracurricular activities. Many times I think students think about clubs and organizations that have happened at high school, but I think it can also be lots of other activities, whether it is caring for a younger sibling, whether it is working part-time, perhaps to help support a family income and household. These are really important skills that students are developing that I think sometimes we don't think about within that regular context of extracurricular activities. Now, I do want to pause and kind of answer that second question that you asked of how that has been impacted by COVID-19 as well. I think in particular, I think about baseball being a spring sport. I think about debate tournaments really, coming to fruition on the national scale of things within the spring semester as well, and everything else that goes along with it. We have had a lot of students that not only have been interrupted academically speaking within this spring semester, but also extracurricularly speaking. Just to offer some reassurance, as institutions and as admission offices, we are not expecting to see that same level of activity and involvement that we would have had this not been happening. The same goes for this particular summer. I know that many students had camps and internships and summer jobs also interrupted. I think in lieu of those regular extracurricular activities, students can talk a little bit more about maybe what they have been able to pursue and explore during this time frame. So have they been active politically by writing their senators or their congress people? Are they active perhaps within their own community, helping a neighbor with grocery delivery or something of the like? Are they sewing masks in their bedroom during this as well? Or are they taking a little bit more time to have that personal reflection and read for fun and really get to know their siblings to a different extent? So I think it's important to think about those extracurricular activities kind of outside the clubs and organizations, and also about what we are doing to personally survive and thrive within the COVID-19 environment.
And that is a super important perspective, right? We work a lot with students that do outreach and get involved in the community. And one of the things that we hear, and I haven't seen the question pop up, but I've heard it, is, okay, so I'm a senior, I'm gonna be a junior, I've worked all this time to be the president of this club, but now the club is almost disarmed because they're not allowed to have they lost their funding because of XYZ. How are those things being, analyzed? Is that what the essay is so important in being able to explain how you changed and you adapted, or what would you say to somebody in that space?
Absolutely. So the common application as well as the coalition application, these are two platforms that are used by institutions nationwide. The common application has about 800 schools. The coalition application has about 160, 170 institutions that accept those applications. Both of the applications are asking students a separate question exactly about that. And so I love that they are really opening their platforms up for students to be able to fully explore some of the academic impact as well as that extracurricular impact so that we can hear about those experiences. I think that the questions themselves that are directly COVID related are a really good opportunity to explore a lot of what has changed for a student. I do want to, I guess, walk back to the just regular admissions essay. This still needs to be a little bit more of a personal statement. And while COVID-19 has had a huge impact on all of us, we are also much more than what we have been in the last 3 to 4 months. And so by all means, if a student is compelled to write about COVID-19 within their regular admission essay, they can do so. But I think many students may also find that they have had other activities, challenges, obstacles, successes within their life that they may want to actually tackle within the admission essay and leave the COVID answers to the COVID questions.
And we're getting a great question here from Carla. She's saying, do you think that setting up in the fall remote and then in-person classes, is that going to affect student learning?
I think likely so. We each thrive within different learning environments. And I think that when it comes to the college experience, obviously students have a choice as to what type of learning style and learning environment they are wanting to select for their college experience. I think that right now, because we are needing to respond to a larger need, we have a little less, I guess, guidance or maybe a little less authority over what that might look like. Some students are absolutely thriving within a remote learning environment. I had an interview last week in which a student was talking about his love of independent learning. And he loved the fact that he was able to really lead his exploration of some of these topics and materials for himself. At the same time, I think the next interview that I had that afternoon was with a young woman who said, I can't stand remote learning and really need to have that in-person environment. So I think that person to person, we're going to see some of these differences. I will say that when it comes to in-person learning, we also know that the high schools are adapting with their grading scales to help accommodate some of that as well. So many institutions have gone to pass-fail coursework or have maybe frozen grades at a particular time or are allowing students to take alternative measures for those grades as well.
So you're getting a shout out from Jennifer. She says her grandfather went to Trinity University, which is exciting.
Go Tigers.
But here's literally the $1 million money question. So how do you think sports will be affected this year?
Oh goodness, I know. This is a doozy. I think that there's really kind of two parts to this. I think that you can talk about the sports being affected at the college level, and that will be largely dictated by the NCAA. I know that Trinity as an institution, we are still waiting for guidelines right now from the NCAA as far as how we might be able to move forward. And then I think on the high school side of things, those decisions are largely going to be impacted by some of their governing structures as well. And so I think the short answer is I'm not sure yet. I think that we are still waiting for some direction here.
And I think senior year is so powerful. I mean, I played soccer at Rice, and it was just one of those things that I remember how pivotal, right, that junior, senior year was, and knowing that maybe there's different opportunities, there's different ways to showcase yourselves. I mean, tournaments are canceled. I actually have, we talked to Bruno and Lester. Bruno talks about HFA in Houston. He's telling me that if the league didn't get postponed, they just cut it, right?
Right.
And so, it's less stats, less games, less opportunities, less scouts. Like their scouting is all changed, and that's a whole other, can of worms in terms of, that is their testing. Their testing is their speed, is their goals, is their stats, is their competition, and I think that is going to be really a game changer, but also opportunity for other people to come through as well, right?
Absolutely, I agree.
And Gail, this is a question I hear all the time, so I'll let you answer this one. So how important is the essay, and particularly in context that you have no test scores now, and do you recommend a particular subject matter?
Oh. I do think that the essay is an important part. Now, not all institutions will require an essay as part of admissions. And so there are going to be institutions that are looking at different factors and evaluating different criteria. For us, I think that there's really kind of two purposes for an essay. One, this is the first opportunity that a student gets to be something besides a statistic, right? So typically we will see the transcript. We may see test scores if those are available, but the essay is really that first opportunity that they get to be something beyond that particular, numerical score as well. I think the second side of an essay is that we really want to make sure that students are prepared for the learning environment and kind of that assessment piece within the college context as well. There are very few Scantrons or multiple choice in college. Your assessment is going to be rated through essays and a little bit more of the written word. And we want to make sure that students are prepared. So an essay can indeed have a big impact on the application. And I think when you take away any one piece of criteria from that evaluation process, you will obviously see the weight redistributed amongst the other criteria as well.
Right. And Judy, I'm going to totally plug you. I'm putting college excellence on here. I want to thank you, one, for all the people that you've helped. You do a lot of pro bono work, but go ahead and tell them a little bit about who you are, because I know we have a ton of new people listening, and how you're tied into knowing Gail, and just give us a little bit of who you are. And
actually, when I'm finished, I'd like to let Gail, we've seen her information flashing, I'd like to let her tell us briefly about Trinity University. So I'm Judy Young with College Excellence, and I help junior high and high school students navigate the college admissions process, because it's gotten a lot more complicated, a lot more moving parts in the past several years. So I help with everything from helping them figure out which college is going to be a good fit, and then what is the process for making sure you're a strong applicant and presenting yourself in a positive way, and doing the essays, the testing, all those things that we've talked about. And I'm fortunate to know Gail actually through an organization we are connected through, and Gail is wonderful and has been kind enough to come and get grilled including me. She has been very flexible, so I've really appreciated having Gail Roberson on. And Gail, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about Trinity University.
Absolutely. So Trinity University is a primarily undergraduate institution. We have just over 2,500 students, and we are in the vibrant city of San Antonio, Texas. We are a liberal arts and sciences institution, and so that really is our foundation. But we are very fortunate to also offer several pre-professional programs. And so we have really robust programs for pre-med and pre-law. We have a fully accredited School of Business, as well as an engineering program, the first computer science program in the state of Texas, really fantastic resources as well. And so we're fortunate to be in the top 40 schools in the nation as far as endowment per student. And so that allows us to have some tremendous facilities that are available to our students, and also offer really robust financial aid awards.
And who do you think is a great fit for your university?
Yeah, great question.
I love that. So oftentimes I think students ask, who is that typical student for Trinity? And it's really hard to pinpoint who is typical. I will say that we enjoy a really diverse campus as kind of broadly defined, but I would say that primarily we are looking for students that are engaged, students that are curious, and students that really want to be involved in their learning. And so I think those are some of those common traits that we see amongst most of our student population.
And that brings me to a question we didn't get to, which is, it's a two-part. Here we go again, but I know you have a good memory. So how can students demonstrate their interest to you? Because I know that can be an important thing, that they're interested in the university. And then how can they find out more about your university?
Absolutely. So one of the unfortunate side effects of also not having test dates available is that is actually an avenue that colleges and universities will also use to gather information about students. And so there may be students out there right now that we would typically be communicating with in a usual or in a normal year that unfortunately we are not communicating with. So I think it's extremely important for students, if they already have a list built of the colleges that they may be interested in applying to, make sure that you are on the college mailing list or communication list, so that we can send you information regarding virtual visits or virtual interviews, or information about opening back up either on campus visits or for the fall as well. And so I think it's really important for students to be active in that particular outreach. I guess the other thing I would kind of plug, most of the information that we are going to have regarding our institutions and kind of where we are in that opening process will be online. So make sure that you go to the individual college websites so that you can see information. I know that most schools have pivoted pretty quickly and are offering robust opportunities for virtual campus tours. And I know we're doing information sessions. We have our current students that are available for our prospective students to connect with. We are doing virtual interviews as well. And so we love to be able to get to know our students as people, and not just these applications. And so students definitely need to plug into those resources if possible.
So great. Such great information. Gail and Judy, you guys know this is my favorite part of the show. We talk about 3 things to do now. So Gail, we still have more questions coming up. But,
Yeah.
all right, I'm going to let you go after this and answer questions directly on the chat, because I'm sure that we'll hear directly from you, from Judy and Gail. But 3 things that people can do right now, and I guess tell us who's the population you're talking to, and what are the 3 things they should do.
Right. So I guess I'm going to be talking directly to students, right? I think the first thing that I would probably recommend to do is stay motivated. One of the questions earlier was regarding the change in learning environment and so forth. I realize that there have been a lot of changes. It is also extremely important to keep up that learning opportunities and the hard work in that senior year. And so I would say stay motivated regardless of what type of learning environment we may be approaching in the fall. The second thing, and I think Judy may agree with me here, don't procrastinate. Does that sound like a good? And so we do want to make sure that students are indeed still thinking about that application process. We know that this timeline has kind of changed and shifted and feels different, but most of the applications are available August 1st. The admission essays have not changed in their prompts, and so this is an ideal time to start on those college essays. So don't procrastinate when it comes to the preparation of your application. And then I think the third thing is really just doubling down on that last question from Judy as well, and that is please go interact with colleges. I think that for many institutions, this is our prime time to see students visiting our campus for the first time. And many of us are still not quite in on-campus operations. And so we would very much encourage students to still get a sense of that campus culture, some of those opportunities and offerings through virtual visits. You can indeed interact with live people on those. And so I would just double down on that opportunity to interact with college campuses during that search.
Great answers, great action. I love having both of you on. Judy, thank you so much for what you do and who you help.
Always a pleasure.
And Gail, thank you for that insight. It's so important to hear it kind of from somebody that's, I mean, you've been in this change, you've been through this transformation, you're still going through these changes. It is challenging, it is hard. And I really thank you for just being available and making the time for us today.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gail. And thank you, Gabriel.
All right, guys, you've heard from Gail and Judy, and I'm going to leave that video up on it, but they're going to be on the chat later on, answering more questions. We would love to have you back again, Gail, because I'm sure things are going to change even more. So we'd love to have you back. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
No problem. And Judy, thank you so much as well. And we are going to leave the Trinity video playing. Audio this time. I think I kind of played a little audio earlier. All right, 1 second. I'm going to hide you. And here we go. We're going to go full screen with Trinity, guys. This is Gabriel Garcia with Expert35. Join us next week. Actually, we're going to have new episodes on travel, on the challenges about getting back to school, and some of the things. There's a lot of businesses opening and closing because of everything that's happening. We're going to have somebody talking about, Beth Revere is going to be talking about, before you go through legal counsel, you can actually go to arbitration. And she's going to help us go through that process. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us. We'll leave you guys with a little video from Trinity University.